Hello friends, I welcome you all to another edition of Daily News Analysis. So in this particular edition, we are going to discuss some very important articles that are part of Hindu as well as Indian Express newspapers. So the first article that we are going to take a look at is about recent visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Maldives. So knowing everything about India-Maldives relation at current times is important from the perspective of mains, particularly knowing the geography, the location of Maldives, particularly in the Indian Ocean region, and the surrounding islands is very important from the perspective of mapping prelims. So stay tuned. Particularly, the second article that we are going to take a look at is about states can't seek delimitation, claiming parity with Jammu and Kashmir. This is the latest Supreme Court judgment on states' demand for delimitation. So knowing the basics of delimitation here, very important from the perspective of prelims as well as mains. Third important article is about France recognizing Palestine as a state. So that particular article is important from the perspective of both mains as well as prelims, knowing from the perspective of prelims particularly how the state is recognized in UN particularly, by UN particularly, that process is important. Particularly, another important article that we are going to discuss is about mangroves. So essentially, this particular article came as an editorial in the Hindu, but we are going to take a look at comprehensively and we are going to cover the mangroves comprehensively, the basics, the environmental aspects, everything. Another important article that in the decoded section that we are going to discuss is about Kargil, on the occasion of Kargil Vijay Divas, Kargil Pahalgam and revamp of the security strategy. Important article from the perspective of GS3 defense. So stay tuned. So the first article that we are going to discuss is about recent visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Maldives. So India-Maldives relation, this visit particularly will act as a milestone in the current trajectory of India-Maldives relation. Particularly, the Maldivian president thanked India for its pivotal role in the economic recovery of the Maldives. On this occasion, Prime Minister Modi is currently on a 2-day visit, as I said, to the Maldives, making a continuous improvement in bilateral relation. The reset in ties gained momentum after the Maldivian president Mohammad Muizzu visited India in October 2024, following a period of significant tensions between the two countries. Particularly, we have seen those tensions, and the Chinese incursions in Maldives in this regard is alarming at that point of time for India as well. But it seems with the recent visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the ties are back on the good trajectory. So what are some of the key highlights of the Prime Minister's visit now? Commemorative stamp released to mark 60 years of India-Maldives diplomatic ties. So it has been a 60th year of India-Maldives diplomatic ties being established, 4 MOUs and 3 agreements signed to boost cooperation in fisheries, aquaculture, tourism, environment and digital solutions. Particularly free trade agreement, both sides agreed to finalize terms of reference and launch FTA negotiations and a bilateral investment treaty with expectations for quick completion as well. Almost 4,850 rupees crore of line of credit were extended by India to the Maldives, first ever in Indian rupees by the way in this regard, to help Maldives address its twin deficit challenge. Debt relief agreement signed reducing Maldives annual repayment to India from $51 million to $29 million under an existing $800 million line of credit. So essentially, India also handed over 3,300 social housing units in Halum Hale, roads and drainage project inaugurated in Addu. 6 high impact community development projects were also launched on this occasion. So remember some of these locations and names. You may get a question in this regard in prelims as well. India to provide 72 heavy vehicle for Maldivian Defense Ministry. Defense and security cooperation in this regard is also very important. It reaffirmed commitment to Indian Ocean peace, regional maritime security and deeper cooperation through Colombo Security Conclave. So, knowing everything about Colombo Security Conclave is also very vital. So, let me know in the comment section who are the member countries of Colombo Security Conclave. Very important from the perspective of prelims. What is the significance of Prime Minister's visit to Maldives now? As I said, this visit marks a significant improvement in a bilateral ties, reflecting a reset in India-Maldives relation after a period of particular strain. Reaffirms the Maldives' strategic importance in India's neighbourhood first policy. Particularly, it reinforces India's commitment to support Maldives in strengthening its defense capabilities and ensuring stability in the Indian Ocean region as well. So, particularly this particular 2-day visit of Prime Minister will boost the ties further. Apart from that, knowing some historic trajectory of this particular relationship will also help us, particularly in the mains. In 1965, India was among the first to recognize Maldives independence. Formal diplomatic ties were established way back in 1965. In 1988, there is Operation Cactus. India successfully thwarted a coup, establishing its role as Maldives' key security partner. In this regard, 1990s and 2000s were a decade of growing cooperation in defense, trade, disaster relief, capacity building. 2008 to 2012, particularly Nasheed era, president under the President Nasheed of Maldives, pro-India tilt was observed, closer climate and development cooperation was there. From 2013 to 2018, it was a Yamin era, particularly it strained ties due to growing Chinese influence on this particular president at that point of time. Emergence of India out sentiment at that point of time was very prominent as well. 2018 to 2013, 2023 particularly Soli era, again major revival happened in the ties. India acted as a first responder during COVID and economic crisis as well. 23-24, now the Muizu era, tensions re-emerged. Muizu demanded withdrawal of Indian troops at that point of time. Essentially, but now in current times, the relationship is back on track with the current visit of Indian Prime Minister. So, this is some of the trajectory of India-Maldives bilateral relationship particularly. But let us discuss how China is gaining footprints in Maldives. Infrastructure project. China built Sinamale Bridge, Villana International Airport expansion and undertook land reclamation at Thilafushi. Debt dependency. Maldives owes China around 40 to 70% of its external debt, raising concerns of debt trap diplomacy. So, China is heavily actually extracting its debt from the Maldives through debt trap diplomacy. In this regard, island leases. Chinese companies have leased islands like Fedu, Finolu, sparking fears of strategic military use of these islands. Defense cooperation is also increasing, by the way, between the China and Maldives, includes non-lethal military aid, training programs and defense dialogues. Strategic concern viewed as a part of China's string of pearl strategy, challenging India's influence in the Indian Ocean region. So, essentially, Chinese presence in the Maldives will be a threat to India's Indo-Pacific strategy in particular. So, India need to be cautious of Chinese presence in Maldives. That's why the uptick in ties is very vital in this regard. So, let's look at from the perspective of prelims the geography of Maldives. You can effectively see some of the islands, islands here in the Indian Ocean region. There is a Maldives, there is a Seychelles. By the way, important to know the sequence from south to north or north to south of these island nations as well. So, you can see the Maldives here, you can see the Seychelles here, Assumption Island, you can see Diego Garcia, which is often in news, is also a location is important. Agalega Islands is there, Madagascar you can see, and Mauritius. So, remember these Indian Ocean island nations and some very important islands in news and their location and knowing the sequence is very important from east to west or north to south as well. You can get the question particularly in prelims in this regard. You can see the map of Maldives here. The equator goes through the Maldivian nation. It is essentially Maldives is a collection of atolls. You can see the number of atolls here, and Malé, the capital, is on Malé atoll obviously, and you can see there is Hawa Dhu Atoll, there is, Goidhu Atoll, etc., etc. So some names of atolls you can remember. So essentially, Maldives is also under a lot of threat due to climate change, changing climate at the same time, and essentially sea level rise. So this is the practice question for you, important from the perspective of mapping. Remember that. Another important article that we are going to discuss is about state delimitation. So essentially, now what Supreme Court has said is states can't seek delimitation claiming parity with Jammu and Kashmir. So in recent times, a petition was filed seeking delimitation in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, citing the recent delimitation in Jammu and Kashmir as a precedent. But now the Supreme Court has flatly denied this particular demand from the states of for delimitation. See, oftentimes the delimitation is in news these days because there is a renewed demand of by southern states to actually delay the upcoming delimitation further or seek the delimitation based on yet the 2001 census only, not on the renewed or upcoming 2026 census. So essentially, there is the fear of southern states losing the representative angle in the parliament particularly. So from that perspective, delimitation is often in news. So knowing the constitutional provisions of delimitation is also very, very vital. The Supreme Court now has rejected the plea of delimitation by Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, saying states cannot demand parity with Jammu and Kashmir. Delimitation in J&K was legally valid due to union territory status, which exempts it from constitutional embargo applicable to states. So what is this constitutional embargo, by the way? It is Article 173 of the Constitution, which bars delimitation in states until after the first census post 2026. So this particular Article 173 was added through 84th constitutional amendment way back in 2001-2. So essentially, hence, no state including Andhra Pradesh and Telangana can undergo delimitation before that time period regardless of population changes. Why Jammu and Kashmir in this regard is different, by the way? Jammu and Kashmir is a union territory, does not fall under Article 173, that is the first argument. Its delimitation in 2022 was conducted based on 2011 census in accordance with laws applicable to union territories. The court stated that states and union territories operate in a different constitutional domains. So Jammu and Kashmir can't be used as a precedent for states. Unequals can't be treated equally, the bench observed. So what is the exact wording of the bench in this regard? Unequals can't be treated equally. So risk of inequality in this regard is highlighted by the bench. Allowing delimitation in just Andhra and Telangana could invite challenges from other states, fair enough, especially the northeast states like Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Manipur and Nagaland, which were explicitly excluded from the 2021 delimitation exercise. This would destabilize electoral uniformity and blur the lines between constitutional mandate and political discretion at the same time. So this is the current status, with Supreme Court actually rejecting the demand of, say, Telangana and Andhra Pradesh for state delimitation. But what exactly is the delimitation? We are going to take a look at some of the basics of delimitation now. It is a process of redrawing boundaries of Lok Sabha and state assembly constituencies. Fair enough. Carried out to ensure balanced representation by adjusting constituency boundaries based on the latest census. Promotes fair election by maintaining a level playing field among political parties. Constitutional provisions. What are the constitutional provisions in this regard for delimitation? Article 82 and Article 170 empower Parliament to reallocate Lok Sabha and Assembly seats post every census. So delimitation exercise obviously is a constitutional process under Article 82 and 170, which gives power to the Parliament to form this delimitation commission. Delimitation is conducted by an independent delimitation commission set up via an act of Parliament. Acts were passed in this regard in 1952, 1962, 72 and 2002. No act was passed after the conduction of census in 1981 and 1991 censuses. Remember this particular fact here, important from the perspective of prelims. The current delimitation is based on obviously 2001 census, and the next will occur in 2026. The census will occur in 2026. So, essentially post 2026 census, the delimitation will occur as well. Article 330 and 332 deal with seat reservation for SCs and STs based on population data. So, let's look at some of the amendments in this regard. 42nd Constitutional Amendment of 1976, a mini constitution in itself. It froze the allocation of Lok Sabha and Lok Sabha seats and the division of constituencies based on 1971 census till the year 2000. After that, we have 84th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2001. It froze the delimitation of Lok Sabha and state assembly constituencies until the first census post 2026. This means that existing boundaries of constituencies which were drawn based on 2001 census will remain in place until the next delimitation exercise. The amendment also prevented the readjustment of the total number of seats in the Lok Sabha and state assemblies for 25 years until 2026. So, important amendment in this regard. After that, we have 87th Amendment Act, which actually updated the basis for delimitation to the 2001 census, still maintaining and freeze the total number of seats per state, maintaining the freeze essentially. So, after looking at some of these amendments, let's look at the Delimitation Commission, a high-powered independent body appointed by the President in collaboration with Election Commission. So, the Parliament passes the act in this regard, but the President sets up a Delimitation Commission in collaboration with Election Commission. What is the composition of Delimitation Commission? This is also very important. A Supreme Court judge acts as a chairperson. Chief Election Commissioner, respective state election commissioners are the members. Its decisions have the force of law and cannot be challenged in any court. Remember this particular fact. Delimitation of Jammu and Kashmir, by the way. Earlier, J&K Assembly delimitation was governed by its own constitution. We have that provision. After the abrogation of Article 370 in 2019, Jammu and Kashmir became a UT and now follows the Indian constitution. That is pretty much that is very much everyone knows nowadays. A delimitation commission was formed in March 2020 for J&K and 4 northeast states in this regard. So, this is the practice question for you, important from the perspective of GS2 polity constitution. Just comment your answer in the comment section in this regard. Another important article that we are going to discuss is about France recognizing a Palestinian state now. So, why particularly now? So, you can see the image of a child here, particularly the Gaza is facing an enormous hunger crisis due to Israel-Gaza war. At the same time, there is a blockade on Gaza. So, essentially that blockade is orchestrated by Israel to a certain extent. So, essentially considering the urgency in this regard and the stalled process of ceasefire negotiations, the French President Emmanuel Macron declared that France will formally recognize Palestine as a state at the upcoming UN General Assembly in September. This makes France the first major Western and only G7 country to take such a step at this stage, marking a significant diplomatic shift in Europe. Macron tied the announcement to the urgency of ending the war in Gaza and protecting civilians from severe hunger crisis. The announcement follows Israel and US withdrawing from Gaza truce talks in recent times, citing Hamas' unwillingness to compromise at the same time. So, looking at the stalled negotiations between Israel and Hamas for ceasefire, the French position in this regard holds a monumental significance. So, what is the French position? What exactly is the French president saying? Macron emphasized that this move reflects France's historical commitment to a two-state solution and just and lasting peace in the Middle East. So, to Israel-Palestine conflicts, there is a very famous two-state solution, and he emphasized that Historically, France has supported two-state solution and just and lasting peace in the Middle East, and this particular move will bring that peace to the Middle East. He called for the demilitarization of Palestine, full recognition of Israel by Palestine, and creation of viable Palestinian state. Israeli PM obviously condemned the move and called it the reward for terror. At the same time, it would create another Iranian proxy in Israeli neighborhood. At the same time, US Secretary of State also criticized the move as a reckless, claiming it only boosts Hamas propaganda and undermine peace. So obviously, US and Israel particularly opposed the Palestinian state recognition at this stage. So global recognition of Palestine in this regard is also very important to know. By the way, you can see the state of Palestine as demanded by Palestinian people here. So essentially 144 out of 193 UN members currently recognize Palestine, mostly from global south, along with Russia, China and India. So traditionally, particularly global south countries have already recognized Palestine as a state, but within Europe itself, in recent times, Ireland, Spain, Norway, Slovenia have recognized Palestinian state, and Malta and Belgium are likely to follow suit in upcoming times as well. What about India? India's recognition and support for Palestine is also very historic. Recognition of PLO way back in 1974, India was the first non-Arab country to recognize the Palestinian Liberation Organization as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people and state. Recognition of statehood way back in 1988. India officially recognized the state of Palestine in 1988, soon after PLO's declaration of independence, becoming one of the earliest countries to do so. Borders supported. By the way, what are the borders of this Palestinian state that India supported? India endorsed pre-1967 armistice line, West Bank, Gaza and East Jerusalem, and East Jerusalem particularly acting as the capital of this Palestinian state as the legitimate borders for a sovereign Palestinian state. So why these particular borders, by the way, pre-1967 borders is sort of a full Palestinian state demanded by Palestinian people. In 1967, we have the Six-Day War between Israel and Arab countries, which redefined the Israeli control on Palestine totally. Consistent diplomatic support. India has maintained its support for two-state solution wholly, backed Palestinian inclusion in international forums and extended developmental aid and capacity building assistance as well. Palestine's status at the United Nations. By the way, it is a non-member observer state since 2012. In 2012, UN General Assembly granted Palestine a non-member observer status, upgrading it from earlier position. Participation rights. Palestine can participate in UNGA debates and activities, but does not have voting rights yet because it is just a non-member observer state. India's position. India supports Palestinian bid for full UN membership. What is the current status in this regard? Palestine remains a non-member state with limited privilege at the UN because essentially United States holding a veto power in UN Security Council will oppose any sort of move in this regard. By the way, knowing the process of admission of new full members to the UN is also very important. Application submission. But first, a state seeking membership must submit a formal application to UN Secretary General. The application must affirm states' commitment acceptance of the UN Charter. Security Council recommendation. The UN Security Council considers the application. Approval requires at least 9 out of 15 affirmative votes. Remember that. Without any veto by the 5 permanent members. What are the permanent 5 of UNSC? China, France, Russia, UK, US. We already knew this. General Assembly approval after that. If the UNSC recommends the admission, the UN General Assembly votes on the proposal. A 2/3 majority of present and voting members is required for the final approval. Final admission of membership becomes official once the General Assembly adopts the resolution admitting the state. So, these are the steps for any member to be considered as a full member or to be admitted as a full member to the UN. So, remember some of these steps important from the perspective of again prelims. So, this is the practice question for you, just comment your answer in the comment section. Important from the perspective of again prelims as well as mains. Now, another important article is about mangroves, the scientist who made mangroves a buzzword. So, essentially MS Swaminathan pioneered mangrove conservation. So, essentially MS Swaminathan, we already know his contribution to the Indian agriculture, but he is also pioneer in mangrove conservation as well. MS Swaminathan was instrumental in promoting mangrove conservation both globally and in India, introducing sustainable techniques like fishbone canal method and establishing key institutions that highlighted the climate resilience of mangrove ecosystems. So, in yesterday's DNA episode, we discussed about corals, and now in today's DNA episode, we are discussing about mangroves. So, what it indicates is both these ecosystems are important from the perspective of particularly prelims as well as mains. So, knowing everything about these two ecosystems is important from the environment perspective. Remember that. So, prepare both these topics thoroughly. So, evolving perception of mangroves, initially valued only by coastal communities for fisheries and livelihoods, now recognized globally for disaster mitigation, climate adaptation, shoreline protection and biodiversity conservation, particularly shifted from being seen as a wasteland to vital multi-use ecosystems. So, coastal erosion and shoreline protection is one of the prominent role played. So preventing coastal erosion and shoreline protection is one of the prominent role of mangroves. MS Swaminathan's pioneering role. So, in 1989, he highlighted mangroves as a buffer against climate change impacts like sea level rise and cyclones. Proposed using mangrove genes for saline tolerant crops and sustainable wetland management. Founded the International Society for Mangrove Ecosystem in 1990. Co-created the Charter for Mangroves included in the 1992 UN World Charter for Nature. Developed GLOMIS, Global Mangrove Database and Information Systems. Scientific surveys across 9 countries led to the creation of 23 protected mangrove genetic resource centers. Essentially, colonial and post-colonial policies promoted clear felling, degrading mangroves health. So, clear felling means essentially it means it is the forest management technique which looks at mangroves as a commercial asset. Swaminathan's foundation proved degradation was due to mismanagement and not particularly local use. So, what exactly is this fishbone canal method? A hydrological method of mangrove restoration, which is commonly referred to as fishbone canal method. You can see the restoration method here, which looks like a fishbone, was developed and pilot tested in mangroves of Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Odisha and West Bengal. The fishbone method is a mangrove restoration technique that creates a fishbone like network of channels to bring tidal water into saline, barren lands. It improves water flow, reduces soil salinity and enables mangrove growth, especially in areas with limited natural tidal inundation. So, you must remember fishbone canal method related to mangrove conservation. It is not like a micro irrigation method, it is a mangrove conservation method. Remember that fishbone method, fishbone canal method particularly. So, these are, by the way, some of the disaster protection and policy shifts in this regard. You can go through that. But what are the mangroves, by the way? Salt tolerant plant communities found in tropical and subtropical intertidal regions. Intertidal regions, particularly the regions between the tides, thrive in areas with high rainfall, 1000 to 3000 millimeter, warm temperatures of 26 to 35 degrees Celsius, mostly located between 25 degree north and south, as they cannot tolerate extreme cold of temperate zones. So, essentially these are the species which are generally found in tropical and subtropical intertidal zones. So, between 25 degree north and 25 degree south, because they can't tolerate extreme temperatures of temperate zones. So, let us look at some of the key features of mangroves. These are halophytes, filter up to 90% of salt from seawater. Some excretes excess salt through leaf glands as well. Water storage, thick succulent waxy leaves retain fresh water and reduce evaporation. Pneumatophores is the characteristic snorkel-like aerial roots draw oxygen from air in waterlogged soils. You can see the pneumatophores here. Prop roots, intertwined roots provide stability against tides and waves. So, lenticellated bark, tiny pores, lenticels allow oxygen intake in low oxygen soils. Vivipary, they follow vivipary sort of. Seed germinate in the parent tree and are ready to root upon falling. So, essentially seed germinates on the parent tree itself, and it is, when it falls, it is already ready to root in the soils. So, that is called a viviparity. So, viviparity is the feature of mangroves, remember that. So, what are some of the types of mangroves? This is very unique, by the way. There is a red mangrove, Rhizophora mangle, location closest to the water's edge, thrives in areas with regular tidal flooding. Key features, prominent prop or stilt roots for support and gas exchange. Nickname, often called walking trees due to visible aerial roots. Height can grow up to 80 feet tall. So, black mangroves, Avicennia germinans, location found inland from red mangroves at slightly higher elevations. Key features, has pneumatophores, upright aerial roots for oxygen intake in low oxygen soils. And then there is another white mangroves. Its location is found farthest inland at the highest elevation among mangroves. So, white mangroves are at highest elevation. Key features, oval leaves with two salt glands at the leaf base. So, you can effectively see the diagram here, red mangroves, black mangroves and white mangroves. Some of the mangrove types important from the perspective of prelims particularly. By the way, what is the current status of mangrove growth in India? So, World Mangrove Day is celebrated on July 26, celebrated to assess mangrove conservation progress. ISFR 2023, the India State of Forest Report of 2023, India's mangrove cover at 4991.68 square kilometer, accounting for 0.15% of India's geographical area. Compared to the earlier ISFR report of 2019, it is an increase of almost 17 square kilometer, reflecting positive trends in restoration and conservation. West Bengal has the highest mangrove cover of around 42.45%, followed by Gujarat 23.66% and Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Remember these figures, important from the perspective of prelims. Sundarbans, West Bengal is the largest mangrove forest in India. You can see the important locations from Sundarbans, Gujarat to Tamil Nadu to Karnataka and other locations. Andhra, Maharashtra also have mangroves as well. Global mangrove distribution. As we have seen the mangrove distribution in India, knowing the global distribution is also important in this regard. Total global cover is around 14.8 million hectares. 75% of world mangroves are found in 15 countries. Regional distribution, Asia with 42%, Africa with 20%, North and Central America with 15%, Oceania 12% and South America 11%. So, essentially you can see the mangrove distribution here. So, mainly it is 10 to 15, 25 degree north and south bend of intertidal zones between these tropical and subtropical zones. So, what are the threats to mangroves, by the way? Natural cyclone, storm surges, sea level rise, coastal erosion and salinity changes, anthropogenic deforestation for agriculture and shrimp farming, and up to 40% loss is observed due to this. Pollution from sewage, plastic, oil spills, rapid urbanization, illegal logging for timber and fuel, etc. These are some of the reasons for mangrove loss in recent times. So, these are some of the conservation initiatives in this regard. What are the international initiatives? There is a Ramsar Convention of 1971 which recognizes wetlands for protection. UNESCO MAB program includes mangroves in biosphere reserve, and IUCN and Blue Carbon Initiative promotes mangrove restoration to combat climate change. National initiatives in recent times, there is a MISHTI in 2023, enhances mangrove cover on coastline and salt pans. Then there is a SAIME initiative, promotes sustainable aquaculture in mangrove zones. CRZ regulations are also there, restrict industrial activity and dumping in mangrove areas, and magical mangrove campaign, encourage citizen participation in conservation. So, these are some of the international and national initiatives for the protection and conservation of mangroves. So, this is the practice question for you. Just comment your answer in the comment section. Important from the perspective of prelims as well as mains. The next important article that we are going to take a look at in decoded section from the perspective of mains particularly is about Kargil, Pahalgam and revamp of the security strategy. On the occasion of 26th anniversary of Kargil Vijay Divas, we have already learned important valuable lesson from our Kargil war heroes, or particularly the India's recent response to the Pahalgam terror attack shows the India's new sort of policy doctrine when it comes to the Pakistan based terrorism. So, essentially it is 26th anniversary of the Kargil war, the first live televised conflict fought between India and Pakistan. In the war, India not only evicted the Pakistani forces but also forced Pakistan to withdraw and seek a ceasefire. So, it was a decisive monumental victory at that point of time by India over Pakistan. A similar situation unfolded recently in response to Pahalgam's terror attack by Pakistan-based terrorists on innocent civilians. India launched Operation Sindoor, a devastating punishment delivered on Pakistan's terror network. It brought Pakistan to its knees in matter of just 96 hours. If Kargil marked a turning point in India's conventional military strength, Pahalgam has set a new benchmark in India's counter-terrorism response. Over the past 2 decades, India has re-strategized its security policies, clearly signaling that any future misadventures will face decisive retaliation. So, what is the context of Kargil war? So, let's look at some of the contextual aspect of Kargil war in this regard. Tensions due to nuclear test at that point of time. India declared itself a nuclear weapon state way back in May 1998. Pakistan conducted nuclear tests soon after, making South Asia home to 2 nuclear armed rivals. India faced threats of economic sanctions from the western countries at that point of time. Internal weakness was there as well. Country had a weak economy. The center was led by coalition government, limiting decisive action. Neglected military modernization, focus on counter-insurgency in Kashmir since 1990 and Northeast, delayed military readiness upgrades, peace initiative with Pakistan. At that point of time, Kargil happened in the backdrop of India's attempt at reconciliation with Pakistan. Atal Bihari Vajpayee's Lahore visit in this regard is memorable. Limited global support. The war happened before 9/11, when global awareness and support for India's fight against Pakistan-sponsored terrorism was minimal. So, this is some of the context of Kargil war, but important lessons were also learned from the Kargil war at that point of time. Kargil was a wake-up call for India. Being the first India-Pakistan war after 1971 fought under the nuclear overhang, it proved that limited wars are possible even between nuclear states if escalation is controlled. If it doesn't go on in an escalatory ladder, the limited war is pretty much possible between 2 nuclear armed countries. The war exposed a major intelligence failure. Neither military nor civilian agencies had anticipated large-scale Pakistani infiltration at that point of time. Lack of real-time intelligence and aerial surveillance led to delayed response and early losses for India. Serious deficiencies were revealed in equipment, logistics and high altitude combat readiness, including lack of specialized gear, artillery support and communications. So, what are the structural changes brought by the Indian Armed Forces after Kargil? Intelligence reforms is one area. Establishment of key agencies. Defense Intelligence Agency was established in 2002, a nodal agency for military intelligence in India. It coordinated intelligence from Army, Navy, Air Force intelligence wings. A National Technical Research Organization was also established in 2004. It specializes in cyber intelligence, satellite monitoring, signal intelligence and electronic surveillance as well. So, our intelligence reforms were undertaken at that point of time, improved cooperation among raw, IB and military intelligence, revamp of National Security Council Secretariat NSCS. NSCS provides strategic internal external security advice to the Prime Minister through National Security Council. Joint Intelligence Committee. Joint Intelligence Committee provides intelligence based recommendations for strategic decision making to the Prime Minister and top national security officials. So, and there is National Security Advisor made a permanent post in strategic decision making under PM. NSA is a key advisor to the Prime Minister on national security and strategic affairs. Military and strategic reforms in this regard are also taken up. Focus on self-reliance due to limited international support in wartime. Development of cold start doctrine for rapid mobilization and limited strikes below the nuclear threshold. So, cold start doctrine is something adopted by India at that point after as a result of the Kargil war and its assessment after that. What exactly is the cold start doctrine, by the way? CSD, a military strategy focused on rapid, limited and focused offensive strikes against Pakistan, designed to be executed within a short lifetime time frame and with the aim of avoiding escalation in a full scale war. It involves deployment of integrated battle groups composed of various military elements for swift localized incursions into enemy territory, aiming to capture key areas and use them as a leverage in negotiations. So, strengthening of mountain warfare capabilities, including creation of mountain corps, emphasis on joint command and coordination among Army, Navy and Air Force, led to the creation of Chief of Defence Staff in 2019. Initiation of integrated theatre commands is also taken up. Defence modernization was speed up. Emphasis on homegrown defence technologies and indigenizations. Key acquisition and upgrades were also taken up. Rafale fighters, Apache, Chinook helicopters, S-400 missile defense systems, indigenous artillery systems and BrahMos missiles were also speed up after that. So, long fight against terror. But despite these improvements post the Kargil war, we have the long way ahead of us. The fight against terrorism is a long one. Slow initial response, by the way. Unlike the swift reforms post Kargil, India was initially slow to act against Pakistan sponsored terrorism. IC-814 hijacking in 1999, Parliament attack of 2001 and 26/11 Mumbai attacks show the slow initial response. Shift in strategy in last decade, but last decade saw something remarkable. Uri attack in 2016 marked a turning point with surgical strikes across the border. Pulwama attack in 2019 also led to Balakot airstrikes with IAF targeting a terror camp deep inside Pakistan, crossing its airspace for the first time. And there is a new threshold after Pahalgam 2025. After the Pahalgam attack, India launched Operation Sindoor, targeting both terror camps and military assets inside the Pakistan. This signals a firm shift from restraint to retaliation, with clear message that any future terror attack will invite devastating consequences. So, there is a new normal post Pahalgam. Although the road against Pakistan sponsored terrorism is long, at the same time, in conclusion, we can say India has learned several hard lessons from Kargil to Pahalgam, and it is now in no mood to show restraint. In May 2025, India's conventional military strength demonstrated its full potential through Operation Sindoor. However, the country's political and military leadership must remain alert and proactive, ensuring that another Kargil or Pahalgam is never repeated. We have to ensure the overall national security is never compromised in the wake of the Operation Sindoor and its tremendous success. So, this is the practice question for you. Very, very important practice question from the perspective of, again, means how the India's policy has shifted post Kargil to post Pahalgam. Important. And that's it from my side, and stay tuned for another edition of Daily News Analysis. Thank you.